Wingo, and I decided to use my story as a way to explain how magical the entheogens are working with us and working with women especially. Because we have a limited time, I'm going to start my journey with Buckeyes. As I started to get into a path of spiritual journey, I started studying metaphysics, and I heard that there was a folklore that said if you keep Buckeyes in your pocket, that you'll always have money in your pocket. And this was a time where I was on a path looking for my way in life, close to turning 40. I decided that this spoke to me. And it was interesting because as a child growing up in Ohio, in the United States, this is the state of the Buckeye state. And I always found them as a child, but I realized it had been a while since I saw Buckeyes, so I thought that this was something that was for me, something that spoke to me. And I looked for Buckeyes. I spoke to different people, met different people, and they all led me to different places. But what I found mostly was there was a disconnection with nature for me. As much as I thought I was connected with nature, I couldn't identify the trees if they didn't have Buckeyes underneath them. So it was a challenge. And for some reason, this challenge led me to a man at the farmer's market who sold mushrooms. Somebody told me, you need to look for the mushroom man. He can tell you where to go. So that sounded very auspicious, and it sounded like something I should go to. And when I found him, he was a very happy, smiling man at the market. Maybe because he had a line of people buying wonderful mushrooms from him. But he told me he would bring them to me, and as well as he dropped them off to me. But the thing that happened that was so crazy and unexpected was that I ended up at his mushroom farm. And I invited my whole family because that sounded like something just very strange and wonderful. So we went to the mushroom farm, and we saw a tour of different mushrooms, oysters, shiitakes, and he told us all about how to grow them and how they were helping the environment. And it was very interesting, but just to spice it up, I guess my dad decided to ask, what about the psychedelic mushrooms? So he answered very pleasantly, you don't want to be caught with them, but studies are showing that the same parts of your brain that lights up when people are on psychedelic mushrooms coincides with the parts of the brain that lights up when people are in deep meditation or in church. And so that spoke to me, and I put that in the back of my mind because that was definitely spiritual. The next week at work, my coworker invited me to a psychedelic lecture, which I didn't know was a psychedelic lecture. He just said a mushroom lecture. And I said, this was my coworker. He was a capoeira instructor. I was an African drum and dance instructor. We were all working in the Safe and Drug-Free Schools Department in Cleveland School District. So I decided to go to this mushroom lecture because I knew that was something important. I'm just at a mushroom farm. Now here's a mushroom lecture. And it did turn out to be a psychedelic lecture. And it showed me how our ancestors were involved with mushrooms and how they used them to get into these different realms and make and use them for rites of passage and other different things, which really just excited me. So I went back to the mushroom man. I said, I just found out some even more great news about mushrooms. And he saw my excitement. He said, you should think about growing mushrooms, and you need a book by Paul Stamets, Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms. It's the mushroom Bible everyone has, and if they want to start their own mushroom farm. Sounded interesting to me. It sounded like a big project, not something I expected for this spiritual journey that I was on, but interesting enough. But I did decide to keep studying, keep looking for information about how it's changing our ecosystem, how it's changing different people with drug problems and just different things just amazed me. Next thing I know, I ended up at the Mushroom Festival in Telluride, Colorado, where I was able to actually not only get the book, but I had the man, Paul Stamets, there to give me information, and I brought that information home, and I just thought it was so interesting that all these things were happening so fast that this just must be the right path for me. But unfortunately, my family, my friends, they did not understand that path. So it was something that revealed personalities, that showed me who people really were. And I just saw that as something very interesting, because I had not taken not one psychedelic mushroom, but yet it changed me in so many ways, that I was able to see people who they were, and I was able to actually learn from growing these mushrooms, because I started a group. We started studying, we started growing mushrooms, and I, of course, would just give them away, because I was giving into everyone else's thoughts about how mushrooms might be a bad choice. So I just wanted to make sure I eased up on this very slowly and carefully, and it was something that was an anomaly. I'm sorry. I'm a little nervous here, but I do appreciate you all for being patient for me. So on this journey, I decided to stay with it. I ended up getting a divorce. I ended up getting yeah, that's a long story. And I also ended up getting laid off. The Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools no longer had grants, and instead of reapplying to the school in a different department, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take my destiny in my own hands. And I started the Buckeye Mushroom Farm. Thank you. So, it was very interesting that these things just worked out. I just happened to live near a neighborhood called the Buckeye neighborhood. And so I said, hey, it must be a reason for that. And I also decided to start selling mushrooms at the mushroom farm. I mean, at the farmers markets. I got into a whole totally different career, of course, with a different group of people. Now I'm dealing with people who thought about local food, who thought about sustaining energy, who thought about how to do things differently instead of working this 9 to 5 every day. And so I was just amazed at how these mushrooms changed my life. And I actually studied for a few years before I actually decided to partake of mushrooms and have an experience. My first experience was very different and unique. My mother was my sitter. Only because she hid her nervousness so well. And while I sat in the basement, I took 5 grams because I had the same protocol that Mudu talked to you about. And I saw beautiful lights and colors and shapes and everything that I had heard of. And I'm sitting there going, wow, this is what they're talking about. These are the shapes. This is so amazing. The next thing I know, I heard, if you think that's something, we really have something to show you. Yeah. Unfortunately, that just scared me out of my skin, so I decided I don't want to be here anymore. They backed up off me, but I learned that it was something that I still thought that I was ready for. I was ready for something different. I was ready for a change in life, and I didn't know that when I really got it, what I was going to get. But I decided to go in again and push the envelope, see what I could do next time, if I could stay with it. You know, if it's something for me, I would definitely surely know. And it was for me. 7 grams, 9 grams later, I'm looking for other people to share this with, and there was no one I could share it with, because of my community who also gave into and gave into the stigmas attached to mushrooms. So I went on another quest, looking for women like myself in the States. And I found that there were very few in my community. And so when I did go to the Entheogenic conference, I decided to talk about women and entheogens. And what I found was that women wanted to talk about that even more than the time allowed. And so they did approach me. I decided to start a group called Women and Entheogens. We're on Facebook if you would like to look us up. And the response was wonderful. Women from all over the state somehow joined this group. They had lots of questions, lots of stories to share. And what I found was that with each journey, I learned more about myself. With each journey that they shared with me, I still learned more about myself. So, of course, the next step was to have a conference. And the beautiful part about that is that so many women spoke up, and I got the chance to meet them. I had been reading about the history of psychedelics in the United States, and I got to meet some of these wonderful people as I went and sought out different people. One of the people I sought out was Carolyn Mountain Girl Garcia. Some of you might be familiar with her. She was on the bus further, and with the band of Mary Pranksters, with Terrence McKenna and that history, I was just so outdone that this was possible for me. And so when she said she would be at the Women's Visionary Congress, I knew that was somewhere I wanted to be. As well as when I was at the Mushroom Festival in Telluride, I was able to meet Hidden Mountain, who was also part of the Women's Visionary Congress. This is a picture of me at the mushroom farm. These are oyster mushrooms. The wonderful thing about oyster mushrooms is that they grow so fast, and they're able to change different organic material into something that they can digest, that they're able to clean up oil spills. So if you heard of Paul Stamets, he was challenged with cleaning up an oil spill. He was actually in a contest where they had other different large businesses that used different ways of cleaning it up, that was challenged also to use their different ways. Some of them used chemicals, some of them used other things. Well, the thing that worked the best was the oyster mushrooms, because they were able to eat the oil and digest it. The mushrooms were allowed to grow. When the mushrooms grew, the bugs came to eat the mushrooms. Bugs attract birds. When the birds came, they brought seeds. Now, instead of a big stinky pile of oil, we had an oasis of life growing from something that you think that nothing could come from. This is a picture of me at the Women's Visionary Congress. To my right is Hidden Mountain, and to my left, Carolyn Garcia. I find that entheogenic people like no other are the warmest, most people who are able to see like no, because the veil is lifted, I believe, they're able to see through all the bullshit. They can see exactly who you are, and if you know, and so that's what I just really love about entheogens, and I think that this is a way that that we can change things, because changing your mind is the way we can get rid of poverty. It's the way we can get rid of hunger, because there is no food shortage, really. There's no shortage of space for people to live. But if we buy into that illusion, then we'll actually make that bigger, make it a bigger problem because we give it our energy. But once we understand that it's all an illusion, we can really make a difference. That's how you can change things. So it's great that people in my neighborhood are growing local food and trying to get people to buy into that. But until we change our minds, I don't think much will happen. But Entheogens is a way we can do that. This is a picture. I don't know who grow these, but this is psilocybin mushrooms growing. And this is something that anyone can do in the privacy of their own home, which I believe is so important because we have things like people traveling to Peru and Colombia and different places, but people in my community might not be able to afford to do that. As well as when the tourists go to these different places, sometimes you have the problem of them raping the land, them not giving back. So the babies are taken of the iboga plant, and now it's challenged now is it could be gone in a few years. We might not see the iboga plant. But with mushrooms, I can take one single mushroom and grow hundreds of pounds of mushrooms just by cloning it, or I can gather the spores and have an unlimited supply of mushrooms. And I can grow it with things that are resources that are around me. Leaves, trees, straw, anything organic. Which means I can go to the basement and find blue jeans. Anything that you can think of, you can grow mushrooms from. So I think that this might be the way to go. And I think this is one of the first ways that we use mushrooms, because mushrooms did not need to be processed any type of way alchemically. So you didn't need a pot, you didn't need fire. You could just pick the mushroom and actually eat it and have an experience. This is a picture of the hoop house that just miraculously appeared. I never knew that I could get a hoop house. I didn't have much money. I worked for the Cleveland School District. But somehow all I had to do was make a couple of steps and things were opened. Things went my way. So there was a grant that was available to get the hoop house put up, as well as a grant available that I was able to use $1 US to get a piece of land to put this hoop house on. These are the beautiful Amanita muscaria. The funniest thing about mushrooms is they're all around, whether we notice them or not. So I was amazed to find in my next door neighbor's house Amanita muscaria, and I must have driven past it so many times. But in Ohio, where the altitude is, you'll notice that these are yellow and not red, like the normal Amanita muscaria we're used to. But these are definitely around everywhere. This is my lab, which I'm very proud of. I got a group together. Basically, we had to build a box. We put a squirrel cage motor on top so that the air can flow through the HEPA filter, cleaning 99.9% of all the pollen and dust and things out of the air. And then we had a sterile environment that we can grow mushrooms with. So basically this was my first investment as a mushroom farmer. And it didn't take a lot of money. It didn't take a lot of years at a university or college. It just took some time and some discipline and wanting to do it. And next thing I know, I had like the biggest laboratory that I knew of in Cleveland. So, so there's not much competition for me in Cleveland. There are no mushroom farmers in Cleveland, except me. And I have the first and only mushroom farm that actually grows commercial mushrooms. Now the thing about it is, of course, I cannot grow psychedelic mushrooms. I can only grow the gourmet and medicinal, but that does not stop me from teaching and encouraging others to do the same. Okay, so that's the end of my slideshow. I don't think we're doing questions, are we?
Well, we got a few minutes, so yeah.
Okay, just